to provide space for any organization and for any group of people, first you need to figure out what are the activities that they do when they come to work. And over a 7-year period, Herman Miller discovered that there's typically 10 activities that are fundamental to everybody. You will typically do these 10 activities. To what degree and how often you spend in each activity is very much dependent on your job role, your age, your personality, your gender. So what's unique to each of you is how long you spend doing the activities. What is fundamental to everybody are the 10 themselves. So I'll run you through what these 10 are. We have 7 that you can see are in the lovely duck eggshell blue. Those are the collaborative activities. Then we have 3 that are individual. So I'll just quickly run through these, and hopefully some of them will resonate with you. So let's start with chat. Chat is those non-work related, fortuitous encounters in the workplace. It's, how are the kids? Did you catch the game last night? The weather's starting to change. Sure, it's hot, right? It's usually the first thing you do when you come into the office. Well, actually, the first thing you do when you come into the office is grab a coffee so that you're able to human and actually talk to the rest of your colleagues. But you don't grab a coffee and then stand in the corner drinking it on your own. You actually want to socialize and connect with your colleagues as well and have those non-work related informal conversations. Now, 50 or 100 years ago, having non-work related conversations, organizations would have frowned upon that because you weren't doing your job. You weren't producing your maximum amount of output. But now, today, we understand that the more you interact with one another, the more this thing called community is built. The more friendships are realized in organizations. If you have a best friend at work, statistically, you will take 33% fewer sick days than if you don't have a best friend at work. Interesting, right? So we want to build community, and we want to retain people in the organization. Because community is the reason why you stay and don't join the competition for an extra $100 a month. Because you've got good friends there. And of course, just because it starts off as an informal interaction doesn't mean that it can't then lend itself to a more formalized one, which is what we call a converse. A converse is 2 or more people coming together to have a work-related conversation. Now, the interesting thing is this happens both physically, between 2 or more people, and virtually now today as well. So we're having to design meeting spaces and workplace environments through the eye of a lens for a digital attendee, right? Really interesting the way that the world is going now. Co-create is you're coming together to physically produce some stuff. So you're not just talking about it now, you're coming together, you're working with your colleagues, and you're co-creating. You're applying your intellect, your IQ, but also your EQ, your emotional intelligence, collectively with other people. Because now, you can't succeed in business just on your own. Now we have to work together towards common goals, and that's how organizations succeed today. It was different 50 or 100 years ago. You used to be able to elbow and tread on your colleagues as long as you produced your maximum amount of output. We can't do that today now because your success is dependent on you working with other people. So co-create is increasing in popularity. Now, co-create, usually you could do it for maybe a couple of hours, a day, or a week maximum. But if it takes longer than that, then you're probably not going to want to be in a space just with these people for that length of time. You're probably going to want to do what we call divide and conquer, which is dividing up that labor, that activity, that task, and then you're working on it individually. If you understand this activity, you're going to understand this whole presentation, because that's as complicated as it gets, everybody. The division of labor to conquer the work that we're tasked with. Now, sometimes I present this to groups of people, and they get the wrong idea. They're like, well, what's the military got to do with it? Nothing to do with the military. It's just the division of labor to conquer the work that we're doing. A huddle. Never, ever confuse this with cuddle, especially if you're based in Dubai. I'm on my 3rd warning, so I really don't have any more warnings left. So a huddle is an impromptu group gathering. Usually happens around your desk, right? You see this happening all the time. Currently today, 70% of collaboration happens at your workstation, which isn't really very appropriate because you are probably working on something. And it can also distract your colleagues around you who aren't part of the huddle. Also, introverted people, they don't call huddles. It's the extroverts. It's always the extroverts that call a huddle. Guys could just gather together to have a brief thought shower session about this particular problem. The introverts experience a huddle like this. Where was the meeting invite? Oh my goodness, there's not even an agenda. I really don't like this. Because they prefer to ponder the problem before they bring it to the group. Show and tell is exactly what I'm doing now, presenting information to groups of people. Warm up and cool down. Now, as a psychologist, I'm so interested in this one. So have you ever noticed that when you're in a meeting and there's like 4 or 5 people, and that person that you know is really bright, bubbly, and has some fantastic ideas just goes quiet, and they don't feel comfortable sharing their ideas or thoughts in what we call a large social setting, that's probably an indication that they are introverted, or more towards the introverted side of the scale. There's nothing wrong with that. That's their personality trait, their type. That's what they were born like, right? So we're just getting the good ideas from extroverts in large meetings. So have you ever noticed that when the meeting finishes and you walk through one of those magical rectangular things known as a doorway, the introverts suddenly start to say their ideas to their colleagues and peers, and the colleagues and peers say, well, that was a fantastic idea. Why don't you say it back in the meeting? I don't know. So have you ever noticed that you end up having a post-meeting meeting on the other side of the meeting room entrance or exit? And sometimes there's a pre-meeting meeting that happens in that space as well. So we call it the warm-up and cool-down of meetings. So those are the collaborative activities. Now let's look at the individual ones. And they start with process and respond. This is what we've been doing since we entered the workplace about 100 years ago. It's the administrative part of your roles. Quite boring, monotonous, mundane. It does not require your intellect to do admin or processing and respond. Depending on your job role, you will admit to spending between 40 and 80% of your day doing process and respond. For me, it's the least important. Couple of reasons. One, it's very well catered for with laptops and mobile phones. I can do process and respond armed with a laptop and a mobile phone from planes, trains, automobiles, pretty much anywhere that I have power and Wi-Fi. Also, have you heard that technology is coming for your jobs? It's not. At least not from my perspective. It's coming for parts of your jobs. It's coming for the things that can be automated. And process and respond, as it doesn't require any intellect to do, is probably one of those elements that technology will start to impede on. Also, I travel quite a lot, usually on my own. Today I'm fortunate enough to be traveling with some of my colleagues. So I usually end up having dinner on my own. You were supposed to go, up that point. Okay. Like that, is it? Right. So I don't want to be that really sad, boring person with the blue reflective light of Facebook on his face. Other social media platforms are available. I don't want to be that guy. That looks really lonely. So I do what I call constructive eavesdropping. So I listen in on the conversations that are happening around me, on the different family tables. Spotting first dates is one of my favorites. Probably some of you have done that in the room as well. But if we go back a couple of years ago now, I was constructively eavesdropping on a family table, which is probably just where the podium part is there. And it was a very normal conversation between a father and his son. And it went a little like this. Ladies, daughters, you probably had the same conversation as well. Son, what do you want to be when you grow up? Daddy, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Pretty normal conversation, right? But what the father said next just astounded me, and I've been telling everybody about it ever since. In fact, under here, I've got goose pimples every time I tell this story. So what the father said in response to that was, son, don't worry, your job hasn't been created yet. And I thought that was particularly interesting because he's right. You know, if we go back 15 years, no one had heard of social media, right? Now we have whole departments. Every single person in this room has a social media account. So it's growing in its popularity. New jobs will come. Old jobs will die. Create. This is what's on your business card. This is what you're employed to do. Apply your intellect on your own on a specific task. And then finally, my second favorite out of the 10 is contemplate, because the imagery just frustrates a lot of my clients. We don't want people sleeping, Oliver. He's not sleeping. He is having a moment of respite, but he's pondering a problem, reading a book actually, and trying to come up with a creative solution to the problem that he is facing, that he's been tasked with.